Hello there and good morning and welcome to an early edition of Lincoln City's pre-match show Matchday Live. The Imps making the long old trip to Bristol Rovers, the Memorial Stadium, looking to build on that fantastic midweek 4-0 win against MK Dons. Got a big show lined up for you this afternoon. We'll be hearing from the managers Michael Appleton and Joey Barton as well. Callum Morton will give us his pre-match thoughts, and we'll be speaking to former Lincoln City player and BBC Radio Lincolnshire summariser Mark Hone a little later on in the show as well. Gary Hutchinson, as ever, joins me. Gary, lovely to see you. Things returning to normal off the pitch, and thankfully things returning to normal back on it. The goals are flowing again.
Yes, it was nice to wake up Monday morning with a renewed optimism and hope. Look, I know we've been through a tough time, that's football, but it was certainly very nice to see the goals flying in the second half after what was a challenging first half. So, hopefully good things to come now. Spring is in the air and we're all full of positivity, Sam.
Well, that's it, isn't it? I mean, it's amazing, isn't it, how much a good result, a good performance can lift the mood at the best of times, let alone during a pandemic.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it was just nice, wasn't it, to finally see us playing some football. You know, the opposition were restricted to few shots. There was none of those moments, those fearful moments where you're coming into 1-0, kind of 1-0 lead or chasing a game as well. It was just nice to feel that Lincoln City of autumn was back. So, everything to look forward to.
Do get your questions and comments in for whether it's for Gary Hutchinson or for Mark Hone, who's joining us later on in the show as well. Today's topic, by the way, is what's the furthest you've had to travel for a Lincoln City away day? Obviously, I mentioned before the long old trip to Bristol this afternoon in the Memorial Stadium. Let us know what the furthest trip you've made to a Lincoln City away day, and I'll do my best to read those out throughout the course of the show. Gary, we'll look back at the goals from Tuesday night shortly. Let's look ahead. Okay, let's look at them now then. Here they are. Any excuse to do so. It was quite some performance. From MK Dons' perspective, Gary, were they generous or were we ruthless?
I think it was a combination of both. I mean, they were certainly generous with that header. A player who cost £4 million in the last couple of years should be putting that on target. But I think that they were certainly a little bit broken at the back. They were kind of putting themselves under all sorts of pressure. But at the same time, it wasn't all about us waiting for gifts. I thought Cohen Bramwell down the left was excellent. I thought his pace caused problems all afternoon, or all evening rather, I beg your pardon. And look, even when they give possession away, you know, it's still 30 yards from goal. There's still work to do. And I think if you will give us an inch, we'll take it. We've looked a little low on confidence in recent weeks. I think as soon as that first goal went in, there was suddenly an energy about the side. We looked like we believed. The manager's been saying that we'll hand out a thumping sometime soon. As soon as that first goal went in, you felt this is where it's going to come. And then every time we went forward, I felt that we were going to score.
Yeah, 11-minute hat-trick for Brennan Johnson, the fastest in the EFL this season. We'll talk about him shortly. But Michael got the game plan spot on. He said in his pre-match press conference, didn't he? He expected MK Dons to win the possession stats. They did that, but it made no difference.
Yeah, exactly. Look, possession is good in football. I don't subscribe to this that only good possession counts. I think you've got to have possession to have good possession. So I'm not going to criticise their approach as such, what they do. I think they try and play football the right way, and when it works well. There is an issue when you have that possession approach and you don't have a plan B. We saw it with Forest Green back in League Two. They were very, very good when they were good. But when it didn't work, there was no plan B. And I think that's something that we do very well. When we need to go on to teams and we need to have possession, the likes of Northampton, Shrewsbury and teams like that, we've done well in being able to switch our game around. Charlton and Oxford are two teams who have had lots more possession than us. And at the same time, we've been able to go out and do well against them. So having more than one approach is important. It's not necessarily the fact that the approach that you have is wrong.
Michael Appleton was understandably delighted with his side's performance on Tuesday night. This is what he had to say, speaking to BBC Radio Lincolnshire after the game at the LNER Stadium.
Well, how pleased are you that you got that clean sheet?
Yeah, I was. I was a little bit annoyed in the build-up to the free kick that they got very, very late on. Lack of concentration for a couple of players. We'll just leave it at that. So I'm glad that didn't happen. And that was a big thing for us tonight because, Alex has not had to make a save. I think they had one block. TJ made a really good block at one point, but apart from that, he's had nothing to do. So really, really controlled performance by us in and out of possession, and dominated what we thought was the right areas of the pitch.
And the fact tonight as well, you could get to the hour mark and you could bring players off who you knew probably wouldn't last much longer and not have to worry about those changes. That must please you as well.
Yeah, it was great. That was really pleasing because at half time, Mike called me and said there's 3 or 4 players struggling a little bit with various things, and the 2 centre halves were definitely 2 of them. So once it got to sort of 3, I felt a little bit more relaxed at the players, because it's not more of we know they can do the job, but sometimes it's obviously difficult to get up to the speed of things, and when you're winning in games, your attitude could potentially be a little bit more relaxed, and it wasn't a day to be relaxed. We wanted to make sure that we win the game, do it properly, and move on to Saturday.
And you look at the results tonight, I mean, the weeks you had off, the Easter break you had off, everything went against you, whereas tonight everything seems to have gone for you. That must be delightful for you and the players to see the table tonight and see you strengthen your position in the playoffs.
Yeah, definitely, because it's not happened, like you say, for a while. When we've lost the game, the teams around us tended to sort of pick up points and stuff. So loads of twists and turns to go. Yeah, obviously this team's just outside the players at the minute. They'll be chomping at the bit, and they'll be looking at 1 or 2 clubs that are in the playoffs, like us and Blackpool and Portsmouth, thinking, right, we're going to capitalise if they drop points. So focus. It was very, very brief in the dressing room. It's like, well done, 3 points, move on. Should have happened a lot sooner. Let's go and look forward to Saturday.
Yeah, Michael Appleton got a smile on his face, and no surprise why. We've got a smile on our face as well, because Mark Hone joins us now. Delighted to have BBC Radio Lincolnshire summariser and former Imp, of course, Mark, on the show. Mark, lovely to see you. It was quite some performance, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was. Yeah, a little bit of a stuttery first half, wasn't it? But certainly second half, I think maybe a few words were said at half time, and certainly they came out Lincoln, and I think put MK Johnson under pressure. And took full advantage, like you both said, a couple of minutes ago. So a much needed win, I think. I think that's a momentum kind of building win, and hopefully they can take that into this afternoon's game.
Mark, how important was the performance as well as the result? Because it's one thing grinding out wins, isn't it? But it's great when you can really enjoy the football, and we were sort of able to hark back, weren't we, to earlier parts of the season?
Yeah, performances are important. Yeah, of course they are. But the results this time of the season are paramount. I mean, they're so important. Would Lincoln fans be really worried if they won 1-0 on Tuesday night and played awful? I certainly wouldn't have been. It's about results, but certainly the performance. When I watched Lincoln, like you were alluding to in the autumn time, Boxing Day against Barton. I mean, they were fantastic to watch. I mean, obviously they thumped Barton, and I'm sure. In next week, I don't think it's going to be that kind of game, but certainly they were fantastic to watch. But at the moment, it's all about results. 7 huge games left. And big 3 massive games coming up this week as well. So all to play for. And like Michael Appleton just said, twists and turns all over the place. You look at today's fixtures. Who knows what can happen over the next kind of 2-3 weeks.
Mark, let's talk about Brennan Johnson then. He's a player we all admire, but I know you've spoken about him in glowing terms when you've been doing the commentary with BBC Radio Lincolnshire. 19 years old, 12 goals, 12 assists. He's quite some prospect, isn't he?
All I can say is Nottingham Forest must have some forward line. That's all I can say. I mean, he's absolutely fantastic. I think he went through a little bit of a quiet spell when the team went through a quiet spell, whether that was coincided with it or whether the team performance was because he wasn't quite firing, I don't know. But I think I did a bit of research, and I did just before the Sunderland game. I did a little bit of, a kind of breakdown of some of these lads that have played. They haven't played the amount of games they have done this season for one club. They've been, the 20 odd games in a season, but some of these lads are now getting up to 30, 35 games a season, and that takes its toll. And I think that's why they had a lull. But certainly, Brennan Johnson's probably had a little bit of a rest, dare I say, like some of the other players. And I mean, I just love him. I just think he's a fantastic player. If Lincoln don't get promoted this season, whether he's going to be with the Imps next season, I doubt that very, very much. If Lincoln aren't in the Championship, you would think that either Nottingham Forest will want to play him next season, or other Championship sides will be looking at him, because he's been phenomenal this season.
And speaking of Nottingham Forest, Gary, Chris Hughton was speaking about Michael and the Lincoln setup in glowing terms in his pre-match press conference earlier this week as well, saying that that Brennan was back for a couple of days at Forest. He was looking sharp, and they're in constant dialogue as well. We've spoken about it before, but there is a good relationship there between the two clubs, and and we're seeing the sort of the fruits of that labour at the moment, aren't we?
We are right now. If we were to be promoted, that might not be the case. If we're in the same league, they'd probably be a little more reticent to loan us their players. But you also look at Morgan Rogers, for instance, who's just won the EFL Young Player of the Month. Manchester City are bound to be delighted with his progress. You look at TJ Ioma, who, as Mark alluded to there, is one of those young players who's up to 35 senior appearances in his first season. Alex Palmer from West Brom. So it's not just the relationships we're building with Forest. It seems that every loan team, probably bar Leeds and Robbie Gotts, but everybody who loans as a player is seeing their player develop, see them get senior games. Now, if we do go into the Championship, that will bode very, very well for us, because the Premier League teams will look at us as a great destination for some of those players. So I think that's important. Also, flip that around, it's good for the players who are coming out of the academies. And Teo Eden, I think, is really reflective of that, because Teo Eden came out of the Fulham Academy into senior football with us. And I think, personally, he's been one of our stronger players. I'm interested to know what Mark thinks of what he's seen of Teo Eden.
Yeah, I agree, Gary. I wasn't sure when I first saw him. I wasn't sure, I just thought it lacks a little bit of concentration. Whether he didn't look quite right, but I think the more games he's played, I think the more confidence he's got, and certainly I think he's been one of the better performances, probably over the last 3 or 4 months. I think he's, I would dare say, pushing for Player of the Season. I would imagine he's one of the candidates, because he's been outstanding. And like I say, I first saw him, I think I saw him away at Rochdale, and he got caught out a few times, just positionally, and he just looked a little bit like he lacked a little bit of experience when Lincoln had to defend in a defensive shape. But that's got better and better, and certainly he's been an absolute brilliant signing for Lincoln, and long may that continue. Again, it wouldn't surprise me if clubs would be looking at him as well. So hopefully, we can keep hold of some of these good players, and he's. I think they will stay in the playoffs, Lincoln. I think they do. I think that was a massive win on Tuesday night. That'll give them so much confidence. But certainly, like you've just alluded to, Gary, I think getting into the Championship will be fantastic not only for the football club, but I think for personnel in terms of attracting players. I just think, onwards and upwards. I can see it just going, getting better and better in terms of the playing squad. So. Like I say, it's twists and turns. I mean, it's football. Who knows what's going to happen?
Just on confidence there, Mark, how important is it to go into the playoffs, feeling fresh, feeling confident? With every team so far in League One this season has had a dip in form at some stage. You would hope now that we've had our dip in form and that we do approach the playoffs, if it is to be the playoffs, in a rich vein of form, as opposed to maybe a couple of the sides of going for the automatic spots, i.e. Sunderland, who may slightly feel disappointed that they've not got through to the automatic stages. How different?
I just think in reality, did Lincoln really think they'd be in the playoffs this season? Probably not. I think the pressure for Sunderland is huge. I mean, I've just looked at their next 4 games. They've got Blackpool twice, Hull, and in between that they've got Accrington. So they are, 3 of them are certainly very, very difficult games. And I look at Lincoln's running. It's not too bad. Yeah, there's some teams in form. I mean, you've got Barton who have won the last 3, and Hull have won the last 3. So I keep saying there's so many twists and turns, but the confidence from Tuesday night's win, coming back from 2-0 down against Blackpool, was massive. Getting a point where they were out of the game, really. And then, obviously, 0-0 at half-time, you're thinking, oh, right, okay, if we can sneak a 1-0, maybe that would just about be okay. But to go and win 4-0 and do it in the manner they did with the goals they scored, I just think it's a massive boost. And, I just hope they can carry it into this afternoon's game. I think Bristol Rovers, are struggling. They haven't got much form. I think they've only won 1 in the last 5. Joey Barton's gone there and not had the reaction, I don't think, that he wanted. It'll be a tight physical afternoon, maybe this afternoon, but I just hope Lincoln can come through that. But certainly confidence, they had the dip in form. I think, dare I say, the COVID break probably did them a world of good. When I talked about these players playing the amount of games that they had, I think having a break, maybe away from the training ground, away from each other, has just really galvanised that. I don't know how many days they may have had off, a week maybe, I don't know, but certainly that may well have just refreshed them. And then certainly that was in the performances that you saw Tuesday night. They just looked a little bit fresher, a little bit hungrier. And if they can carry that through the next 7 games and into the playoffs, you would fancy Lincoln to beat somebody on I don't know if it's 2 legs in the playoffs. I haven't looked that far ahead, but certainly you would think Lincoln would have a real chance of certainly getting to the playoff final. And then again, it's whatever happens on the day happens. You can't really predict it. So, but no, a huge week coming up for Lincoln City and for a lot of the other clubs as well in and around the playoffs. So, I think by the time we come to next Saturday and the results come in from next Saturday's game, we might have a little bit of a clearer picture of what we need to do in terms of getting to them, making sure we secure them playoffs. And who knows, Sam, Gary, you get 3 wins on the bounce here this week, and Sunderland have got them games. You got Portsmouth as well. Like I say, automatics aren't out of the question. I just think maybe we've got too much ground to make up. But certainly, football's a strange game. Anything can happen.
That is it. I mean, it is football, and that's why we love it. Gary, let's move the conversation on to today's game then. Bristol Rovers, as Mark mentioned, they're 3 points off safety at the moment. Is it as simple a game for Lincoln as it looks on paper?
No, absolutely not. There's no games at this level that are simple. I really fancied Bristol Rovers, if I was honest, earlier in the season to be on the fringes of the playoffs. You looked at some of the players that they signed. I know they lost Johnson Clark-Harris, which was a big blow. But you look at players like Zane Westbrook that they signed and Jack Baldwin that they signed, and they had Ed Upson there who plays in the central midfield who had some good seasons with MK Dons. They've got good, talented League One players. I think the collapse that they've had over the course of the season has been for plenty of reasons. I mean, changing a manager late on is certainly not ideal. Changing a manager twice in a season is very tough. But look, Joey Barton, for whether he turns over and watches Champions League or not, is a manager who can galvanise a squad. He did it with Fleetwood. I mean, he took Fleetwood from the lower reaches of League One up the table. He's divisive, he's abrasive. But I think if you're playing under him, you probably feel a little bit of solidarity. They've beaten Doncaster recently. I know they've only won 1 in 5, but I seem to think have they got 4 points from the last 2 games. I think they beat Doncaster and drew in Northampton. So it depends where you take your slice of form as to whether they're in form or out of form. I don't put a lot of stock in form until you start looking ahead into things like the playoffs. So today's very, very dangerous, I think, for Lincoln. It's one that on paper, lots of people will say they should win that. I don't know what Mark thinks, but personally, I think they're more dangerous than the ones that you go into thinking you're not in with a chance.
It's a good point, Gary. Isn't it?
It is. It's a very good point. And that like you say, they have got some good players. Their form's a little bit. I was with Gary. I thought they would do a little bit better than what they've done. So I'm a little bit mystified as to why that's not happened. Clearly, changing a couple of managers, personnel, that has a kind of a knock-on effect. But certainly, I just think I just get an undertone from Joey Barton, and I don't know if it goes back to an FA Cup game or something that went on with Matt Reed, that he doesn't particularly like Lincoln City. I just get that from his interview, and I just think there might be a little bit of tastiness on the sidelines and on the pitch this afternoon. To come out on an interview and say, I turned over at half time to watch the Champions League. Did you really? I'm not sure that's really, doing your homework as such. And then for the reporters to say that Lincoln City play long ball, I mean, wow, what are they watching, to be perfectly blunt with you? So it's going to be an interesting afternoon. And I think it'll be a really tight, tough game. And I just hope a little bit of brilliance from one of the Lincoln City young starlets may just tip the balance here. And if you come away from Bristol Rovers with a point, I don't think that's a bad result going into a couple of big games as well. So I don't know, points tally. I don't know. You just can't tell, can you? Some people say, we want 7 out of 9 points. Some will say we want to win 9. Get the 9 points in 3 games. Some might say 5 points. But who knows? It's just one of them. But certainly, if you come away with a point this afternoon, I wouldn't be too disappointed with that.
And we'll be hearing from Joey Barton, who gave his pre-match press conference, as Gary and Mark alluded to there. We'll be hearing from him a little later on in today's Matchday Live. It makes for very interesting viewing indeed. Mark, how did you used to deal with the early kickoff? Obviously, a 12:30 kickoff this afternoon, a long trip for the boys yesterday as well. How will that play a part this afternoon?
Not at all. It shouldn't make any difference at all. You should be prepared for the game, no matter if it kicks off at 3 o'clock, half 12, 5 o'clock. If it's a Sunday, a Monday night, it shouldn't make any difference whatsoever. Yeah, there might be a slight tweak to some of the lads and the way they have to prepare themselves in the mornings, but it shouldn't make any difference at all. The concentration, the focus should be, do you really look at your clock thinking, I should be still in bed? No, it shouldn't make any difference at all. They've got to go and do a job. They're professional footballers. I don't think that should make any difference whatsoever, personally.
It's only us, though, that have been keeping an eye on the clock this morning, making sure that we're up on time. In terms of furthest trips, today's topic, Mark, is what's the furthest trip from a fan's perspective that supporters have made for a Lincoln City away day, obviously with Bristol Rovers being so far away. From a player's perspective, I'll read some of these comments out as well. Have a think about how far you used to travel, I guess. What was the longest trip you made from a player's perspective, Mark?
Plymouth, Torquay. I think they're probably the longest ones. They're probably the longest. I mean, I played at Lincoln United. We went to Workington on a Tuesday night. That wasn't particularly nice. But certainly, it's you get used to it. As a footballer, you get used to being on a coach, staying in hotels, all that kind of stuff. You do get that. And, I always made a point of, if ever the fans travel long distances, you always make sure you go and clap them, because to travel some of the distances they do, to spend their money, to put the petrol in the car, the time, away from their loved ones, it's fantastic. And it's just a shame, again, that we haven't got supporters going to the home games and going to the away games, because there's obviously Lincoln City's support over the last few seasons, certainly away from home. I mean, it's always been good. Even when I was playing, it was good, but certainly it's increased and ramped up the atmosphere at away games sometimes. So, it's as soon as we can get fans back in, that would be really good. But certainly, Exeter. I remember Exeter.
I like this one. Yeah, longest I remember Exeter away. Mr. Ashton had done the raffle by South Park roundabout. No motorways. I think 6 hours for a 0-0 draw. But that is what it's all about, isn't it, Gary?
You can tell yourself that afterwards, but probably not so much at the time. I've done a couple of trips to Exeter myself. I'm lucky enough to have family there, so I've never had to worry about the journey straight back. Torquay. I think the longest I ever did, I seem to remember going away to Crewe with my dad in the 90s, and it was the longest because we broke down on the way home and I didn't get back until early hours of Sunday morning. So, you miss the experience. Look, no matter how far you travel for an away day, as a fan, you don't just miss going to football matches. You miss meeting your mates, piling in a car, whether it's Boston, whether it's Torquay, Workington. Oh my Lord, one place I've never had the joy of going. Of course you miss it. You do. Fans will be back soon. I think it will make a big difference to Michael's side. But I also think that the club have done really well in engaging with the fans. I'm not just saying that because I'm on the Matchday live show. But I think keeping fans involved is really important. And I've seen lots of clubs where there's been kind of a break between fans and club. I'm not going to mention names, but there's lots of stuff on social media where fans are kind of feeling really broken away from their club. That's not the case at Lincoln City. And also, if we were going down the M5 today with the position we're in, we'd be taking 1,000 fans. It'd be an amazing day out.
Certainly would indeed. Mark, been great having you on Match Live. Stay with us for the next 5 minutes, if you don't mind. We're going to hear from Callum Morton now, and then we'll have a quick chat about Callum, and we'll bring you back into the conversation as well. This is what Callum Morton had to say in his pre-match press conference earlier this week.
It's been different. I think, obviously, we're different types of players, I guess, and it's probably not a role that I'm 100% suited to, and I guess I know that I've got different strengths and different ways of playing. But I mean, I guess it's difficult, but I think it's one that I'm willing to do, and hopefully as a few more games go by, hopefully I'll manage to get a bit more comfortable with it.
Yeah, it seems in a Michael Appleton team that the centre forward isn't necessarily the big part of the centre forward game is scoring the goals, but just linking the play up. You did that on Tuesday night. How important is that part of your game, and how is that developing? Yeah, I think obviously, I guess in different teams that I've played in, maybe the role that I've played is more of the goal scorer, whereas I think in this team, whoever's playing down the middle tends to be the almost a battering ram for the rest of the team to go and attack, which obviously Tom's done a brilliant job of that this season. And I think maybe again, it's not a role that
100% suits me down to the ground, and I think I do see myself as more of a goal scorer. I think, probably different formations maybe, but I guess like this is the role that I've been asked to do, and hopefully I can do it to the best of my ability still. And I guess just hopefully it goes well still.
Yeah, honest appraisal there from Callum Morton, giving his pre-match thoughts to BBC Radio Lincolnshire's Rob Makepeace there. I'll bring both Gary and Mark back into the conversation. Gary, I'll start with you. We want to hear players being honest, don't we? We say so often about players being media trained and everything that goes along with that, but ultimately they'll have roles and responsibilities, and sometimes it might not suit their specific game, but it is about the team.
Yeah, I mean, I think we've seen it throughout history that we have players doing jobs that they're not entirely suited to, and I seem to think it is more forward players than anything. I mean, I remember seeing Ben Tomlinson stuck out on the wing. I remember seeing a player called Dave Cameron many moons ago playing either left or right of a forward, which absolutely didn't suit him because he was the battering ram. So players do have to be flexible, particularly in this Michael Appleton team. We talk about Theo Eden, who's played left back, holding midfield, attacking midfield. The boy would play on the wing if you asked him to. But Callum Morton, I do think that we're seeing it in his performances, that he's not entirely suited to the Tom Hopper role. I think when he was brought in perhaps to be the goal scorer in the last 20 or 25 minutes after Tom had worn central defenders down, perhaps. But professional footballers are just that. They are professional. They play football, and therefore, if they're asked to play in different positions, they'll do their best. It's just refreshing to hear him talk about it honestly, to be honest.
Yeah, Mark, I'll bring you into the conversation as well.
Yeah, I agree. I've seen Callum a few times, and he's one of them players that I feel plays off the shoulder of centre halves. He's quite clever. He's got good feet. His movement's quite good. But he's a slightly different player to Tom. And, I just think it's a shame you can't combine the two, because what a player you'd have. Probably be in the Premiership, to be honest. But no, certainly he's a player I've liked watching. I mean, his goal at Sunderland was fantastic, and he's very cold and calculated in front of goal. We're just watching the finishes here, but the Sunderland goal was fantastic. That's kind of the quality he can bring to the attacking play for Lincoln. But certainly, he's a lad that's got a lot of talent, but I just don't see him as one of them battering rams, as he calls it, where he has to play with his back to goal. Just watching the Sunderland goal here, it's a fantastic goal, swivel and finish. So he's got a lot of talent, but I think he's more suited to play on the shoulders of centre half, where he can get down the side of people and twist and turn and use his good feet, as the goals have really showed there. So, he's not one that will hold the ball up, get the ball wide, cross comes in, and he's going to out-jump a centre half and score a goal. So they're two slightly different players, but both bring certain qualities to the team. And it's just how Michael, I suppose, sees the opposition, how he thinks the game's going to transpire into what qualities he needs as a front player. So, they're both good players, but both slightly different in the way they work.
Right then, it is just about 11:30, obviously an hour before kickoff, which means we can get today's Lincoln City team news to face Bristol Rovers at the Memorial Stadium, of course. The Imps looking to build on Tuesday night's 4-0 win against MK Dons. This is the starting 11 that Michael Appleton has named to face Joey Barton's Bristol Rovers this afternoon. He makes a couple of changes. And as I said, Michael Appleton making a couple of changes to the side that beat MK Dons on Tuesday night. TJ Omer and Lewis Monsma, the centre-back pairing this afternoon. No Joe Walsh, no Adam Jackson either. The team in full as Alex Palmer, Regan Poole, the aforementioned Ioma and Monsma alongside Cohen Bramall. Theo Eden, McGrandles and Johnson make up the midfield three. It is then Rogers, Scully and Morton. The substitutes are Long, Sanders, Jones, Howarth, Anderson, Rowan and Can. So just a reminder there, Palmer, Poole, Ioma, Monsma, Bramall, Eden, McGrandles, Johnson, Rogers, Scully and Morton. Mark, I'll come to you shortly. In the meantime, Gary, we'll have to start with that news at centre-back. Michael did say yesterday that there was a chance that both Walsh and Jackson wouldn't make the starting 11. In this case, that is true.
Yeah, it's a little bit disappointing having seen Joe Walsh come back in, have a great 45 minutes, and then Blackpool played really well against MK Dons. He's going to be a huge loss. Adam Jackson too. I think the problem is you find that Bristol Rovers tend to play with two up front, Ayunga and Brandon Hanlon. Now, Hanlon is a real physical specimen. He's a very good player as well. He's remind me a little bit of Vidane Oliver, but perhaps with a little bit more ability. He's only scored once since the turn of the year, I think, but he will be relishing the opportunity to go up against two young centre-backs. So how Ioma and Monsma gel together and how they perform this afternoon is going to be key as to whether we actually take anything from the game or not, I think.
Yeah, it's a big afternoon for the young centre-back pairing, isn't it, Mark?
It is, yeah. It's a shame that one of them hasn't made it, Jackson or Walsh, just to help one of them. We've got one of the youngsters alongside just to get through the game. So a big ask for the two youngsters. Alan is a handful, but you're a professional footballer. If you're 19, 20, 21, and 22, you're a centre half. You've got to stand up and be counted, and certainly, the focused, determination, the aggression, but controlled aggression when you're playing against a physical player. You have to be sometimes a bit clever. Sometimes you can't win the first ball, but you've got to make sure that the second ball you're covering your centre halves. The fullbacks need to make sure that everything's kind of nice and tight. You've got to stop crosses. All them kind of things, normal defensive duties have to come in. And, it's a big ask for TJ and Lewis, but they've got to stand up to it. They've done it before. They've proved they can do it. So, the pressure's on. Can they step up? And Joe Walsh and Adam Jackson hopefully will be fit for a few games in the running. So when they come up against some of the big hitters as well, that we can get them in. But certainly, that they've got a job to do. And I've got confidence they will do that.
Whilst we're on the theme of defence and the defenders, Gary, Cohen Bramall really seems to be settling into that left-back spot. Obviously got his goal the other night. Looks really settled now, doesn't he? Knows his position, knows what Michael wants out of him, and he's an extremely pacey player, but he's got this in his locker too.
Yeah, he is. I mean, dare I hark back to say I think he looks better when he's got a Joe Walsh at the side of him, a more experienced centre-half helping him on. But I also think in an attacking sense, he's got a lot in his locker. I mean, he is so quick. He looks more like a wing back than a traditional left back to me, probably like Harry Toffolo did when he first signed. Toff was somebody that really liked to get forward as well. It's obviously going to take him time to settle. Remember, he stepped up from League Two to League One, which is a significant step up. And I think when you come into a team like Lincoln with Michael Appleton, he's very training focused. There's lots of patterns. You have to understand the way that we play. I don't think it's easy to come in and make an immediate impact. So I think he struggled in his first couple of games just getting to grips with how we played. And when you're Saturday, Tuesday, you haven't got that full week to work on patterns. You're always preparing for the next game as well. So, but a beautiful free kick. If he can whip a couple of corners in and land them on big Lewis Monsma's head with the same sort of accuracy, be nice to see some potency from a set piece. But I'm very excited about Cohen Bramall for the future.
Absolutely right. We heard from Michael Appleton a little earlier on in the show, giving his post-match thoughts following that win against MK Dons on Tuesday night. This is what he had to say ahead of this afternoon's game.
Not quite. We've still got Adam Jackson, Joe Walsh and James Jones who are 50-50 for tomorrow. Not ideal, losing two centre-halves potentially? No, it's not. I'm getting used to it now, Rob. It's they may be available. We're going to see what happens this morning, but they're both still a little bit sore yesterday. So we'll have a better idea today. If it's too much of a risk, then obviously clearly we won't risk it because there's too many games coming up thick and fast. But I think the players themselves will give us a better indication whether they think they're going to be okay for tomorrow when we see them this morning. And TJ Ayoma filled in a centre-half on Tuesday night. I guess he does give you that option, doesn't he? He does, yeah. So, obviously him and Lewis as well, who's between them, they played a lot of games this season. So, listen, and they did okay in the game against Oxford if that was the case. But hopefully, it's one of them where both Adam and Joe are feeling much better this morning. They're okay to play. But like you say, at least we've got a little bit of cover there if we need it. People will look at the fixtures you've got coming up against the likes of Hull and Peterborough and Charlton. But actually, is it games like tomorrow that will define how your season will end and where you'll finish? Yeah, potentially. I mean, I just had a conversation in court with someone about it. they're saying the same thing to me. I'm telling you now that those games are the easier ones. They're the easy ones. They're the games that, the players know that there's an expectation to perform. And if not, so you're going to lose the game. But for me, the expectations to perform are in games like tomorrow and Burton Albion and Shrewsbury coming up. They're the ones that, either teams are fighting for their lives or they're in that sort of mid-table bracket where they've got sort of nothing to lose and can play with a bit of freedom. So, it's going to be a very, very difficult game tomorrow. We'll come up against a side who will be fighting for every single sort of tackle decision. And they're on the back of a good win last week.
Yeah, I love the idea that you can just bump into Michael Appleton and chat all things football and all things Lincoln City with him in the co-op as well. Brilliant. Very Lincolnshire as well. I'll bring both Mark Hone, who's sticking around as well, which is great stuff, back into the conversation. Gary, he's under no illusions, is he, that this is a really tough task?
No, absolutely not. You would certainly not expect a manager to say anything otherwise either, would you? I mean, it would be abhorrent for a manager to come out and say, well, we think it'll be relatively straightforward. It won't be. Judging by the Bristol Rovers team news, I think Hanlon isn't actually playing, so that's going to be an interesting dynamic up front. I think he's on the bench. But look, it's not. And when you've got something to play for at the end of the season, it's tougher. I seem to remember back when Mark played and Brighton were bottom of the table when they came to us on the last game of the season, but they were playing for their pride. That was a really tough game. And it was tougher than many of the ones that we played probably in that quite exciting run-in. Because it's almost like they get this realization that, heck, we're actually playing for something now. Look, when Rochdale came and beat us earlier in the season, Fleetwood were falling away and they came and beat us earlier in the season. So I'd be happier if we were playing MK Dons or Crewe, Shrewsbury, somebody marooned in that mid-table where perhaps, there's a couple of players already on the beach. It's not the case. We'll have to be on it 100%. I think we've got the right setup and balance to win the game, but we shall see.
Do you expect it to be an open game this afternoon, Mark? We mentioned Joe Barton a few times. We'll be hearing from him in around about 5 minutes' time as well. But how do you expect Bristol Rovers to set up this afternoon?
Well, they've got to go for it. Put it bluntly, haven't they? I mean, I don't think they'll go gung ho. I think if Joey Barton has done his homework and has watched the second half of the game Tuesday night, then maybe he would have seen that Lincoln. Gary touched on it. If you give Lincoln an inch, they'll take it. Trust me. And they've got players to exploit space. Their transition from getting possession of the opposition to moving forward, through the lines, they're very, very good at it. And if you give them that opportunity, they will hurt you, as MK Dons did on Tuesday, and as I've seen throughout the season, as fans have seen. So I don't think Bristol Rovers will be gung ho. I think they'll have to go for it, but I think it'll be a calculated, going forward. I think they'll have to make sure they've got one eye on the counter attack because Lincoln is so good away from home on that counter attack, and they've got pace. We talk about the pace of these young players. They have got extreme pace, and if Bristol Rovers overcommit, especially in the final third, and Lincoln are able to do that transition, get the ball, get players, facing Bristol Rovers' goal, I think they'll cause Bristol Rovers all sorts of problems. So I think it'd be cagey. I think it'd be quite physical early on. I think Joey Barton will get them revved up for the game. I think, I would imagine as a manager, he's probably very much the same as he was a player. He'll be aggressive. He wants his players to be on the front foot. So Lincoln are just going to have to counter that for the first 15, 20 minutes. And if Lincoln haven't got quite the right mentality, they're not playing a Hull, they're not playing a Sunderland. If there's a little bit of fragile mentality in Lincoln City, they could get found out in that first 20 minutes. So I think Lincoln have got to go, toe-to-toe with them first 20 minutes and just make sure that they don't concede and just make sure they're in the game, because I think Bristol Rovers, I don't know why I keep saying Bristol City. Bristol Rovers will have to keep, trying to get these 3 points, and I think they'll overcommit at some point in the game, and that's when I think Lincoln will hurt them.
As long as we don't call them Bristol, both clubs, like the Nottingham clubs, don't they, like to be called Nottingham Forest, Notts County, Bristol Rovers, Bristol City. As long as we stay away from that, I think we're all right.
Yeah, exactly.
Let's get a view from the opposition now. I caught up with Bristol Rovers fan and podcaster as well, Caris May from the Gascast. This is what she had to say about her team's season so far.
be honest, as a Rovers fan, I think everyone would agree that we all thought it was going to be better than it is. It's been shambolic, to be honest. We set up the season quite badly. In hindsight, we look back and we think, wow, were we really going to go into the season with just 3 strikers up front? We had a promising transfer window, to be honest. We were signing the likes of Sam Nicholson, Zane Westbrook, Max Amer, who was the captain at Gillingham. And we were getting all these players in, but then sometimes if you get too many players in, they can't gel, they don't really connect. And it seems like that's kind of happened to us. But then losing Johnson Clark-Harris to Peterborough at the start of the season was a huge blow, and then not replacing him. We've got Brandon Hanlon, Joe Nyanga and James Daly. They're the 3 strikers we've had all season. 2 of them have been injured for the majority of it, so we've had 1 striker up front. And to be fair to Brandon, he's not had that much experience. He's only 23. He had a bit of experience at Gillingham, but not vast amounts. And we're missing the goals from JCH massively. So so it's not gone too well. And now we're climbing a huge mountain to try and get out of this relegation zone, but it's looking unlikely. And you look at it overall and you think there's no surprise that we're down there. And if we do get relegated, so be it.
You mentioned Brandon Hanlon there a couple of times. We're going to come on to him very shortly. In the meantime, can I ask you about Joe Barton and the job that he's done? Because I know he divides opinion. Where do you stand on him?
So I'm a fan of Joe Barton. Twitter was just an absolute cesspit when he was first announced. Fans were arguing against each other. People were unsure of his appointment. There were fans that were threatening not to go to a game until he's out of the club. So it's not gone down too well with a lot of fans. But for me, I know he's got a bad reputation. But that comes secondary. For me, it's whatever is in the best interest of the club. We need to stay up. We need to try and stay in League One. And I did think at the time he was the best man to do it, because he's a bit rough and ready, and he'll get them playing for the shirt, and he will, take no sort of prisoners here, and he'll try and get players playing that really cares. He openly called out Max Amer, our captain, and said he's not good enough. He's not a leader. He's not a captain. He's not going to be in my squad for the remainder of the season. So he's definitely what we needed in terms of mentality and getting these players playing for the shirt. But I just think, what's he to do? They're not good enough, and that's clear as day. He's not had a chance to have his own transfer window. So if he has to rebuild in League Two, he'll have to rebuild in League Two, but I don't necessarily think it's his fault. I did think it was potentially the right appointment, but if he takes us down, we can't blame him.
How difficult have goals been to come by then this season? Because I think Luke Leahy is your top scorer, and he's a left back. What's happened there?
I mean, that just sums up our season. Our left back is our top scorer with 11 goals. So yeah, it's not been great, to be honest. The strikers are just so raw. I'm not surprised that we haven't scored many goals. We had an opportunity in January to strengthen up front. Paul Tisdale put all his eggs in one basket for Jayden Stockley, and Stockley then went to Charlton. Obviously, he's gone for the bigger club with more money, and that these things happen. But he shouldn't have gone all out for one player. He should have, kept his options open, because ultimately it shot us in the foot. And we've been struggling for goals all season, and it's something that is going to ultimately send us down.
I mean, you mentioned that ultimately send you down. That was my next question, was 3 points off safety with 5 games left to go. Can you stay up? Presumably no, judging by what you've just said.
I mean, we can. We absolutely can. All we've got to do is win all 5 games, right? But that's just not going to happen. Unfortunately, I've watched Rovers through my TV screen every single week, and I just cannot see how we're going to claw ourselves out of this. We just don't have the ability in our squad. We don't have the mental strength. Joey Barton could do all we can to try and get these players playing how he wants, but it's just not happening. It never has done all season. It will be a miracle, I would say, if we stay up. But it's one of those things where you think we shouldn't be down there. With this squad we've got on paper, we shouldn't be down there. So if we do manage to stay up, it will be relief, but at the same time, it will be, see you later. Let's just rip this squad up and go again, because it's just not been good enough this year.
Yeah, Karis May speaking to me earlier today from the Gascast podcast there. Thanks very much to Karis for joining me. Gary, Mark, I'll bring you back into the conversation then. It looks pretty doom and gloom at the moment for Bristol Rovers.
Yeah, I'm a little bit surprised. The last time we had somebody on who was that despondent, I seem to think was Rochdale and the beaters, and the time before that was Swindon, and we got a draw. So let's not read too much into that at all. Just in case, I disagree. I think they've got some good players. I don't think that they've got a great squad, but I do think they've got good players. I'd be really concerned about Joey Barton though, because Max Amer is good enough for League One. He's proved it season after season with Gillingham. So when you come in and you call out your club captain in that way, you know, that's not going to inspire the players that are there. And if you haven't got a transfer window to work with, what you've got to do is come in and make them feel like they're good enough to stay up. Not essentially tell some of them, well, your leader's not good enough to stay up. I'm baffled by that management tactics. I'm absolutely baffled.
It's interesting, isn't it, Mark? I mean, in terms of managers that you've played for, I guess you've never played under someone quite like Joey Barton.
No, and I completely agree with Gary. To call out your skipper when you're in a dogfight for relegation is I just don't get it. I just don't understand the mentality of Joey Barton going in and doing that. Whether he's trying to stamp his authority on the squad, you know, on the club, I don't know. But that is so divisive. I just don't understand. And like Gary says, you know, the best teams I played in, or the teams I remember, were about the team spirit. It was about togetherness. It wasn't about individual brilliance. It wasn't about, the team I took, with Lincoln City, the team I played in, there were some brilliant individuals. But as a team, as a squad, we were so together. Yes, some of them hated John Beck. I liked John because he played me all the time, but some of them didn't like him. But that didn't matter when we played on the pitch. It wasn't about John Beck when we went on the pitch. It was about us lot as a group of players. And we had no probably real divine right to get promoted out of that league at that time, but we did because we were together. Yes, we had a sprinkling of good players, but I remember Gareth Ainsworth leaving, and we went on an unbeaten run for 10, 12 games or whatever it was. So it's about a collective spirit. When you're in a difficult situation, as Bristol Rovers are, to come in as a manager and say that about a captain and say that about some of the other players that you're not good enough, wow, that is not going to be conducive to getting a team spirit together, to get put your tin hats on and go into the trenches and go, right, come on, we're going to have to get ourselves and this club out of this situation. You know, it's almost like, well, who's next? What's he going to say next? If I don't play well, is it me that's going to be told publicly that I'm not good enough? I've had that experience when I was a young lad at Palace, and it's not brilliant and it's not clever, and it doesn't take much for players to not revolt, but to go, actually, I'm not sure about this manager. And I just think, the way that lady was talking as well, the club just seems to be negative. It just seems to be negative. But don't make no mistakes about it. He will rev a few up today, Joey Barton, in that dressing room before the game. And like I said, Lincoln have just got to be on the metal first 20 minutes that they don't. If Lincoln's mentality is not right, forget about the physicality, because they'll have that. They're professional footballers. The physicality will be there. If mentally they're not quite right, I think they could get found out this afternoon. So, a tough afternoon. But yeah, with Gary, I really don't understand Joey Barton's way of thinking there.
Well, let's hear from the man himself then. This is what Joey Barton had to say in his pre-match press conference. He was asked if he kept an eye on Tuesday's game at the LNER Stadium. This is what he had to say.
I was obviously watching the game between Lincoln and MK. First half was a bit drab and dreary, and you flip over and watching the Champions League and see how real football's played. That was my key, and by the time you turn back, obviously Lincoln in the ascendancy and end up winning the game relatively comfortably. But I'm seeing things at League One level now that I've not seen in a long time, like insane decisions to play football with no purpose. So I think they were given an enormous opportunity by the way MK played, and hopefully we can challenge them on Saturday, because they're a side that's riding in the top echelons of the table, and we need to be the very, very best version of us in order to take the points that we're going to need to get to that safety mark. With the legs that they've got on the front side of the team, there'd be no reason why you wouldn't get the ball forward quickly. Certainly if a team tries to pressure, they play from the back, try to suck it into a press, and then obviously hit longer balls over you for the pace of Johnson, Scally, Rogers, Morton. to use their legs and their wheels to get on the backside of your team and cause you problems. So it's one of those where we're unbeaten in 2 the last couple of games, and we've just got to keep that run going. We have as I say, a home game. We've caused lots of teams problems here, certainly since I've been here. Maybe I haven't taken all the points that performance may have garnered, but we've certainly competed, and we've got to make sure that we do that Saturday against one of the top sides in the division, a side that's got a game in hand on a few of the sides in the automatic spots, and won't have given up on automatic promotion. They sat top of the table for a large part. Appy's done a fantastic job there, and they've come off it in recent weeks. I think they'd only won 2 in 10 or 12 or something like that before obviously Tuesday night, where hopefully MK as presenting with the chances to us as what they were on Tuesday against Lincoln, not when we played them on Tuesday night here. And I think if we're not able to shut teams out, and these have scored 4 during the week, if we're not able to shut teams out and keep clean sheets, then you've got to score at least 2 goals to win a game. And at this moment in time, we don't really have the front part of the team scoring goals. So the lads know what's at stake. They know what's expected of them, and it'll be over to them now to see if they can execute and if they can get the job done. If not, then obviously you're going to suffer the ultimate price, which is demotion from your current division. So nobody wants that, and as I say, we will fight with every single sinew we've got in our bodies to protect from that. And for me, the words have got to stop from the players, and obviously action now has to take place on the pitch on a match day.
Yeah, certainly always an interesting listen, isn't he, Joe Barton? Not quite sure who Anthony Scally is, but there we go. Right, absolutely flown through this afternoon's show. Let's bring in Ben Knappman from the Third Tier podcast, League One expert as well. But not only that, Ben is also a Fleetwood Town fan, so knows a little bit about Joe Barton as well. So before we come on to the League One fixtures or some of the other big League One fixtures this afternoon, Ben, what were your overriding thoughts of Joe Barton as a manager overall?
I liked him, but it didn't surprise me when he goes and calls out the captain. Cairns made a few mistakes in the playoffs against Wickham, and ever since then he was a scapegoat at Fleetwood, But that's the same player that, saved a penalty, made 3 or 4 world-class saves in that. His man management was sometimes poorer players. If Kyle Dempsey's now flying in a good Jill side, he got rid of Kean Bolger, who was a good player at the time, tried to get rid of Cairns. Other than that, he made me believe in the Fleetwood side that I haven't done before, really. And we were good to watch, but that man management was poor, and it probably was the right time for Joey Barton to leave the club.
Right then, let's have a look at some of today's other big League One fixtures then, Ben. We will start with Blackpool versus Sunderland, which feels like a massive game, doesn't it, in this division?
Absolutely, and Sunderland are a good side. Blackpool are a good side, and they want to be under the radar. I don't think they are anymore. I think they're 15 unbeaten. Sunderland were 12 or 13 unbeaten. They lost the last 2 games. I think there's an optimism feel with Blackpool. They're flying at the moment, aren't they? And Sunderland are a bit disappointed that they've lost chase of the top 2. I fancy a draw in that one, if I'm honest with you. I can just see Blackpool coming out strong and probably getting that first goal. Blackpool's most of their draws have, when they've been winning and they've lost losing positions, as they did against Lincoln last week when they were 2-0 and Lincoln came back and drew 2-2. But I fancy a 1-1 draw in that one.
Charlton versus Ipswich then. Ben, I'll ask you about this one, then I'll get Gary and Mark's thoughts on it as well. Charlton versus Ipswich, 2 sides as well going for the playoffs, 2 big teams in the division.
Absolutely, and when I watched Charlton a few weeks ago, I thought they were awful. Then since then, I think they lost a couple of games, and they're now eight unbeaten. They've won 3 out of the last 4. Atkins has done a good job since he's come in. I think he just calmed them down. Look, lads, enjoy your football. If you don't get the playoffs this year, we'll go again next year. And that's what you need. You just need something, a calm and relaxed atmosphere, especially the last 8 games. You just need it to be a calm influence. Paul Cook's only got 10 points out of the 10 games, since he's been in 2 wins, 4 draws, 4 defeats. That is going to be a longer process than the Atkins one. I fancy a Charlton victory in that one. I think I'm going to go for 2-0. I think Charlton if there was going to be anyone that gate crashes that current top 6, it will be the Addicts. I can't see it just getting in this year now.
Interesting stuff. Let's bring the League One table back in as well. And Gary, I'll just ask you with regards to Charlton as well. It's been quite some rejuvenation, hasn't it?
Yeah, it has. I think they've always had the players. I think that they struggled early doors because obviously the takeover didn't happen until just before the transfer window. I think there was a bit of panic trying to put a squad together really quickly. And it just didn't work under Lee Bowyer. I think Nigel Adkins does play the long game, like Ben says. I think he's a manager who will certainly build for the future. He'll add a calm to them. They're in a very good position at the moment, and if somebody does drop the ball in the playoffs, they're well placed to move in there. But it's a huge game for them today. Look, Ipswich are not brilliant. I don't think they'll make the top 6, but they have been difficult to beat at times. We saw it at their place. They're another team, as Joey Barton bizarrely says, that plays possession football in League One, which seems to be some sort of crime. But they will be doing it better and better. So I actually think that'll be a draw. It would be the perfect result for us if those two split the points down the middle.
That's what we're hoping for, isn't it, Mark?
Yeah, definitely. No, I agree again with Gary. I just think Nigel Adkins, if you go on Twitter, he just, and follow him, which I do, he just seems a very calm, positive person. And I just think you've got two contrasts there between Joey Barton and Nigel Adkins as manager. I just think Nigel's just, I would have said maybe just relax the players at Charlton and just gone, look, like Ben said there quite rightly, I think they've gone, well, if it's not this season, we'll do it next season. So no pressure on you. Just go and enjoy your football. Let's see where this takes us. And I think the results have just come from that because they've always had players, decent players there. They've always had a decent budget. So I just think, they're a team that could, if one of the teams above mess up, I think they're really capable of getting themselves into that playoffs. And a draw would be a fantastic result if Lincoln can win today. That would be brilliant because that just gives Lincoln a little bit of breathing space from them.
The other game we picked out this afternoon, Ben, is Oxford versus Gillingham. I feel with both of these two sides, they've always been on the periphery, but just never been quite there in terms of playoff challenges. But I guess, it would be remiss, wouldn't it, to rule them out?
It would. And I think it's always been kind of, one of the teams is 3 points off the playoffs. If you win today, you go into the playoffs, and they've always drawn or lost. And then they've gone 2 or 3 games without a win. That's the difference between the top 6 now and, Oxford and Gills. I think Gills have had a very good season, whether they get into the playoffs or not. I think Oxford, I would have fancied them to do better than they are right now, especially with, that front 3 that they've got, a good midfield, Brannigan being one of them. The lad from Liverpool, I spelled at Fleetwood a few years ago as well. I fancy Oxford winning that one. I think they're the team that have to, take the game by the scruff of the neck, really, and try and get into the playoffs. Gills, I think, would be happy with top 10, top 12 this year.
Interesting stuff indeed. Ben, stay with us. What I'm going to do is I'm going to read you through today's Lincoln City starting 11. If you're only just joining us now, Michael Appleton making a couple of changes to the side that beat MK Dons on Tuesday night. It is Alex Palmer, Regan Poole, TJ Oman, Lewis Monts for the centre-back pairing. No Joe Walsh, no Adam Jackson this afternoon. Cohen Bramall is the left-back once again. It is then Teo Eden, Conor McGrandles and Brennan Johnson, Morgan Rogers, Anthony Scully and Callum Morton as well. The substitute bench reads as Long, Sanders, Jones, Howarth, Anderson, Rowan and Can. What I'm going to do is I'm going to bring all 3 of our guests back in and get their score predictions. Gary had a pretty good one on last Saturday, wasn't it, Gary? You got the 2-2 correct. How do you see it going this afternoon score-wise?
I'm not going to be popular, I'm afraid. I'm going to go for a draw today. I think it will be 1-1. I think Bristol could get the early goal, as Mark alludes to. We've got the quality to draw the game, but I think it's going to be a real challenge.
So Gary says draw. What do you say, Mark?
I'm going to be a little bit more positive than Gary. I'm going to go Lincoln to go 1-0 down early on, but I think they'll come back and win the game 2-1. And I think they'll win it on the counter-attack, probably in the last 10, 15 minutes.
And Ben, 2 questions to you. A, what is the score going to be if I can get my words out this afternoon? And B, as the neutral, can Lincoln City get promoted this season?
No word of a lie. I was going to just do exactly what Mark just said. 1-0 down and they win the game 2-1. I think Anthony Scully will score just for Barton. And I think so. I think they've been through the toughest part now of the season where they've got a load of injuries. And that win the other day was huge for them, just to lift the spirits back up. They've got, key players coming. And obviously, Grant's coming back soon, isn't he? So that'll be a lift. I reckon Lincoln could go up. But I'm sitting on the fence. I'll get splinters, but I reckon we'll get the. I reckon we're going to go to the playoff final. That's all I'm going to say right now.
Right now, we'll have to get you back on before the end of this season to get your overall prediction then, Ben. Ben, Gary, Mark, much appreciated. Thanks ever so much all for joining us on Matchday Live this afternoon.
Thanks, guys.
City fans, you can get your match pass now by going to www.weareimps.com/ifollow. Fingers crossed they can get the win at the Memorial Stadium this afternoon. Do enjoy the game. Bye-bye.